Hey YouTube, this is Jeremiah from New Life Counselling. I hope you're doing good today. Hey, I want to talk today about a different video we haven't talked about before. And even though the theme you may not feel like it applies to, it's still good to know because this actually deals with everybody that's a human being, okay? And it's how to understand your teenager. Now, I'm gonna approach this from a very different way than what maybe, not necessarily about techniques, but it's more about an understanding of the why, all right? How the brain's wired, how we function, okay? And guess what? Whether you're an adult, an ancient, wise person of 99 years of age, or coming up, and maybe you're a teenager, young adult, you're in your 30s, you're in your 40s, which I call too young to be old, too old to be young stage of life. Wherever you're at, it's still important to know the mind of a teenager, all right, and understanding that. All right, so let's get started. What am I talking about? Well, first and foremost, it's this. Although when we talk about teenagers, in order to understand them, we'll often talk about the chemical side of things, all right, or what's often known as the physiological, the connection of the mind and the body. So we talk about hormones and zits and all that stuff, increased libido, all these kind of things that happen to a teenager, all right? And of course, lots of different emotions and all these different things. But how does this all work? Well, I'm not going to talk about the chemical side. We'll leave that for the doctors and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about this part here, the brain, the mind, all right? And it's important to understand that there is actually a very distinctive difference that happens in the mind of a teenager, okay? So understanding the mind of a teenager, all right? So here's the thing. When we are born as a baby. You have a brain, okay? And, it's interesting, of course, we know that there's different parts of the brain. How do we know that? Well, beyond, science and pictures and stuff like that, you can actually tell because when a baby's born, you can actually tell within this part of the brain here, there's that soft spot, all right, that you can kind of feel actually where that hemisphere differences, the left and right part of the brain. But as we get older, it begins to develop, okay? So that's why the early childhood years are super important, all right? Within especially the first 2 to 3 years, the amount of information that's being processed and learned, all right, is tremendous. It's incredible what happens. And of course, through that, an area that I was taught in years ago is called ages and stages of development. And in those ages and stages, up until the ages around 11, 12 years of age, there's lots of different areas where if you can catch that age and stage, and if the child is struggling and developing, you can then fill in those gaps, help provide opportunity to fill in those gaps to be able to reach those ages and stages in whatever various capacities they are. But back to the brain of a teenager, this is where things shift, all right? We've talked about this in other videos. The brain from a very, very broad, loose perspective. We basically have this top part, or what's called the top part of the brain, called the prefrontal cortex. This is our thinking, logical side, okay? It's where we get our thoughts, it's where we come up with ideas, all that stuff. Now, although I point to here, really it's that back part, what's often known as the midbrain, okay? This is what's known as the limbic system. This is the emotional part when I get upset, if I'm hurt, if I'm angry, I'm scared, if I feel rejected, shame, all these primary emotions that are hardwired in us, okay? Now there is a third part, it's the lower part of the brain. This is more of where automatic functions are, eating, going to the washroom, all that kind of stuff. But the main work that us therapists do, all right, is really within these parts of the brain, all right? So when you hear terms like cognitive behavioral therapy, that's the cognition, that's the thought process. Another term that some people have heard, many haven't, it's called person-centered therapy. This is more of the focus on the emotional part of the brain. But either or, whichever bias or style of modality that a person's working in, the outcome then leads to the behavior, the why I do what I do, okay? So putting that all together, here's what happens in those teenage years, all right? Well, simply this part and this part that are being developed when a child hits around that 12, 13 years of age, all right, give or take, this is where things go into what I describe as under construction, okay? And in that construction mode, specifically the main area that goes under construction is the prefrontal cortex of the teenage mind. So hormones and issues and changes to the body, all of that stuff, which are also significant and huge to that child, a teenager, all right, eventually to become a young adult. For the work I do, the work we do as therapists, this is huge because this is under construction. Now, for those of you who are in the Calgary area, it's been a while now, but you might remember many a couple of years ago, there was a ton of bridge construction. I mean, you'd drive and you'd be like, what normally is a 20, 30-minute drive was like an hour because of construction, bridge construction, bridge. Oh, look, it's a bridge here. It's a bridge there. Oh, look, there's another bridge. Oh my gosh, it was bridge craziness for a while there. But as I was driving one day, I realized, this absolutely explains what's happening to the teenage brain. It's under construction. If the brain is like a bridge where it connects like a bridge, and it connects to the emotions, it connects to the thought, it connects to our body physiologically. Well, if it's under construction, then we've got to understand that it's not that the brain is like brain injured. I mean, injury would be something that's purposely done, or that's happened to you, but it's a form of what could be considered like a brain injury. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, you see, depending on the brain and where injuries happen with someone with brain injury, depending where that brain has been injured, it will affect the outcomes. So for example, many individuals with actually what's called traumatic brain injury, TBI, well, let's say they get injured in a certain spot within their prefrontal cortex, it then is not working anymore, and it creates what words that we call like impulsivity. All right, saying things or doing things before we mean it to happen, and next thing we realize, I shouldn't have done that. That was bad. Okay. And guess what? That's just like a teenager, isn't it? Geez, I can't believe I did that. It's like I wasn't thinking.